in this room wasn't reaching somebody like the ambassador who can actually try and do something about it. So make sure you send your message upwards about the importance of logistics, the value of the logistics, the benefits of good logistics, and what a great job you do, but also the challenges that you face. Mexico, as the mayor of Guanajuato kind of indicated in his presentation earlier, the Mexican automotive industry will only be as good as the Mexican automotive logistics industry. So we need to make sure that we communicate the challenges that we face to help the car makers, the part suppliers, the logistics companies, and at the end of the day, your customers, whoever they may be. And one of the things that's been obvious over the 2 days is that Mexico isn't just about Mexico, it's about connecting with the rest of the world. We've heard the figures about how important imports and exports in and out of the USA are. But these markets are going to change. Next will be, China, South America, Europe, other parts of Asia. So this session is going to be looking at connecting Mexico. Perhaps be a particular focus on the US for obvious reasons, but we'll be looking at the opportunities and the challenges of NAFTA and border flows and linking Mexico with the rest of the world. Unfortunately, we've also had a couple of dropouts, but very fortunately, on the other hand, is that we've got 2 great panel members and presenters for this session. So, without further ado, I'd like to hand over for the first speaker of the afternoon, to Luis Sandoval, the Logistics Manager from Global Purchasing and Supply Chain for General Motors. Thank you.
Muy buenas tardes, soy Luis Ángel Sandoval.
Luis Sandoval, Logistics Manager for GM Components in Mexico. In this agenda, I will share with you what GM Mexico is, our suppliers, our supply chain, and I will share some data about future growth. What is GM Mexico? GM Mexico has been almost 80 years present in the country. We have 15,000 direct employees with GM Mexico, 105,000 indirect jobs created, 4 manufacturing facilities, 1 regional engineering center, 1 after sale center, and 164 dealers of our brands. Now if we go to the facilities, we have 4 facilities, 1 in Silao, central part of Mexico. In 1995 it was opened, and where we also have assembly, engine and gearboxes and stamping activities for Silverado, Cheyenne, GNC Sierra production. The next complex is Ramos Arizpe complex, which was opened in 1981, where we also have operations for assembly, metal stamping components, where we also do our Sonic, Captiva Sport and Cadillac SRX vehicles. The next complex we have is the one for Toluca City, where we have aluminum foundry and also an engine plant. There we also have the regional engineering center located and the post aftermarket center. This engineering center is also the one with the highest technology for Latin America, and where we also, the Mexican engineers work every day with the highest technology, developing, innovating new products. The next complex is located in San Luis Potosí. It started operations in 2008. There we have assembly, transmissions, and stamping, where we produce Avio, Chevrolet, the most sold vehicle in Mexico, and trucks SUV. And then we also have central offices, which has since 2000 offering administrative services in these brands. We have Chevrolet, the most traditional one and more sold in Mexico. Buick, the crossover premium. GMC, which is our specialized SUV brand with pickups, SUVs and crossovers for the Mexican market, and obviously Cadillac, the luxury car brand. Now, if we move to the suppliers base, important for the logistics, we have more than 550 tier 1 suppliers in Mexico, out of which, or from which, 190,000 part numbers are bought, and 5,000 shipments are received in our Mexican plants. Additionally, every year we export 600 million components are exported from these suppliers for the rest of General Motors company. What it accounts for in GM value, 14 million US dollars. In 12-14, this was a 16% increase, 14 billion US dollars, and this is 16% increase in comparison to 2013. Where are we shipping these purchases? 96% of our purchases stay within the NAFTA region. As we heard from the panelists, NAFTA has been very important for Mexico, and this chart explains that. For us, out of that 96%, 44% stays for the GM plants in Mexico. 4% goes to different parts of the world, also to GM. To this end, we need to have a supply chain which is effective, and I would like to share with you some pieces of information. What we need to do as component logistics. We obviously have to use several modes of transportation. Our main entry ports for transportation, for maritime transportation, is Lázaro Cárdenas Port, Manzanillo, Altamira, and Veracruz ports, in that order. Likewise, the crossing points for railroads is Nuevo Laredo and Piedras Negras. In the case of ground transportation or trucks, our main crossings are Nuevo Laredo, Ciudad Juárez, Reynosa, and Matamoros. And in order to support our operations, I want to talk about three cities where we have logistics centers of importance. Ramos Arizpe, where we have a cross dock, the warehouse for our overseas material. San Luis Potosí, where we also have warehouse for our overseas materials, and Detroit, Michigan, where we have our main consolidation center of ports from the US and Canada. How do we move the parts from Canada and the US into Mexico? Basically, we are using trucks. 52% of our volume is through trucks. 42% is intermodal mode, which could be considered by train, and the rest, 6%, by rail. In reality, 1 week in my life is interesting. We have more than 8,000 movements per week, and we need to make sure they arrive in time at the plants to make sure there is the production of our units, so they go to the market in a timely manner. There are some opportunities I'd like to share with you what could be improved in as to the border flow between Mexico and US and Canada. We're looking for better companies with higher quality, supporting us in the crossing of our containers. You know, the ground transportation is very important to ensure the crossing points, and the efficiency is very important for us. We are also working together with the US and Mexican authorities in another area to harmonize customs schedules. We know in the main crossing points in the US and Canada we have a 24 by hour availability, 24 by 7 availability. This is not the case in the main crossing points or main customs points of Mexico. This would be important to cut down on cost and to improve our logistics, to have 24 by 7 availability. As a country, we should not lose sight of investment in infrastructure. As Secretary Guajardo said, it is key for us to continue with infrastructure investments, both for railroads, I think it's very important, and not leaving aside investment on ports and highways. Speaking about growth, and I think this is just a reiteration of what has been said before. Secretary Guajardo talked about Mr. Ernesto Hernandez's announcement last year, President of GM Mexico, where there was a confirmation of a significant investment for Mexico, for our facilities, this in line to support. It is said that by 2020 GM will be growing to 80%, and the numbers, the figures that we see is about 5 million vehicles per year, according to the Mexican Association of the Automotive Industry. Thank you. Muchas gracias, Luis, por compartir la perspectiva de General Motors.
Life you have with just a few thousand movements happening every day. So next up, to give a logistics service provider perspective, I'd like to welcome to the podium Julie Luna, the Chief Commercial Officer of XPO Logistics. Thank you, Julie.
Hey, good afternoon, and I want to thank Louis for including us in the first Auto Logistics Conference here in Mexico City. We're very excited to be a part of it. I want to talk about three key things today. One is just a very short overview of XPO Logistics. We're new in the marketplace, so some of you may not be as familiar with us. But really, I want to spend most of my time talking about intermodal, both where intermodal has traditionally done very well, and also some new innovative services that you may not be familiar with that are now in the market as we look to handle the growth that Louise just talked about. So my background, just a quick second on that, I've been with XPO since acquisition of Pacer in April of last year. And previous to that, I had 23 years with Union Pacific Railroad. Most of that was involved with automotive, and the last 6 years I ran their automotive business unit. So I've been very involved with Mexico Automotive for a number of years. So XPO is a company that started in 2011 with an acquisition of a very small company called Express One. And since then, we've grown to a $3 billion run rate, and the goal is to be $9 billion by 2017, and probably about half of that through acquisition and half through organic growth. But really, the more important vision is to have an integrated logistics solution so that no matter what mode you need to ship, everything from LTL to air charter, we'll be able to handle that for you. We're currently the third largest intermodal provider. Pacer has been involved with Mexico Intermodal for more than 30 years. We're the largest expedite provider. If you've heard of NLM or Express One, those are both XPO companies. And the largest last mile, which is essentially the people that come to your house and install an appliance, something that's very common in the US. We're the third largest truck broker in the US, And we're actually very focused on getting a presence in Mexico in 2015. We will likely launch 2 cold starts in country. We completely agree that it's very important to expand the dray carrier and truck base, and so we're very focused on doing that in 2015. And then we have a growing presence in contract logistics. We do all the, like the Disney, we manage their website, we manage their retail store supply, so that's another arm of XPO. But really, I want to focus mostly on intermodal. You're probably very familiar with this, but intermodal does offer a cost advantage versus over the road, anywhere from 15 to 20%, as long as it's over 650 or 700 miles. It does cross the border fast with run-through trains, very secure, over 98% damage-free. As you can see by the picture, once the containers get on the train, it is quite difficult to access them when they have locks, etc. Several of the providers are able to offer a bundled custom solution. So if you don't have a customs broker at Laredo, they can give you an end-to-end solution where you don't have to deal with that piece of it. And then there's several traditional routes that provide truck-like service that I'll talk about on the next slide. And then there's 3 very innovative services that were launched in 2014 that I want to talk about as well. So if you look at kind of what are the historical routes for the KCS and FXE, north-south between US and Mexico, you can see them on the map. The majority of it is certainly Laredo, south in-country, and then also El Paso as well as Nogales. And that has traditionally offered very competitive truck-like service from Chicago or upper Midwest down to Mexico at 7 days door-to-door. And this has been such a success for the railroads that the Chicago train often runs at capacity. So a lot of what we're focused on in the industry is how do we grow that capacity and be able to handle the increase in production. You've certainly heard that the US railroads as well as the Mexican railroads have had very good years recently, so they have a lot of growth. And so it's important that we figure out how to handle more volume and still stay within where they want to be from a growth perspective. So one product that was launched actually November of 2013 was from Marion, Ohio, and you can see it up in the circle. It's kind of the upper Ohio, and this service runs from Marion to and from Mexico. And it's important because it sits right in that upper Ohio, Midwest, kind of the parts supply belt. And so what we're able to do is launch this product. It's a CSX UP KCSM product, and we have an OEM that actually saved over 3 million dray miles. And that's all because it was previously running over Chicago, and now they're able to ramp it much closer to their supply base. So this is a product that we are working with the railroads to expand both the number of ramps it goes to in country, but also open it up to other OEMs, to tiers and additional suppliers. There's a lot of product that wants to move from that upper Ohio basin down into Mexico and reverse. And then Union Pacific actually launched 2 products in 2014. The first was UP FXE to Monterey and back. And this is significant because it's really the first intermodal service that kind of offers a parallel competitive product. And it's running anywhere from 4 days southbound, sometimes 5, to 5 to 6 northbound. In addition, they launched the Memphis to Laredo service. That's 3rd a.m., and they've since expanded that to Atlanta. And they're looking at going in-country with that product, hopefully as far as Slough. And again, these are both truck competitive products. It's significant for us because we've had these products on and off of the market throughout the years, but we feel with the increase in production, we finally have the density to really offer the days of service that you need. And then the 2015 focus will be on Inter-Pacifico. The FXE has invested a great deal both in infrastructure as well as security in that line that's in the oval, really from Mexicali to the interior. And there's 1 million trucks that cross border. And so we're focused on establishing that service and then also looking at intra-Mexico intermodal. You've heard a lot of very staggering growth numbers. And certainly to be able to handle that, we're going to have to figure out ways to generate more capacity, either from a container truck perspective as well as rail. And we feel that there's opportunity to offer some very competitive intermodal lanes within country Mexico. So going forward, the opportunities that we kind of see kind of across the supply chain is to continue to tighten the relationship We all know that whenever you try to change something, whether it's a SCAC code or a routing or you're doing any sort of change within your supply chain, it can be very difficult if you don't have a good working relationship across the different entities. And they're certainly very important. It helps us make change much quicker. We need to understand the opportunities to streamline the supply chain. Now that the DOT has announced early January that Mexican trucking companies can now operate in the US, there may be some opportunities to eliminate some handoffs and different things that will take some redundancy out of the supply chain and speed up the product to market. We need to continue to work to expand the auto decree. I mean, right now, it's only available for those who are producing vehicles. We need to be able to expand that to other tier companies, as well as even beyond automotive. I know that the Mexican Intermodal Association is working on the agricultural inspections and moving those from the border in country, and the more we can do to speed that up and move that product and not have it sit there for 10, 12 days, it will free up capacity again. And then one thing that is very common in the US is that we reload empty steamship boxes that are in the eastern part of the US and move them west back to where they want to go to the port. And we really think there should be a viable market to do that in Mexico, to look at loading the 40-foot steamship boxes that are made empty on the east coast or in the southern part of Mexico, move them back to the west. Typically, we can do that at a very competitive cost. And it'll increase the amount of capacity we have from a container perspective, but also over-the-road capacity as we move some trucks off the road. I know we talked about this morning about increasing the rail options, and really it's not going to be just the railroads bearing that burden. It's going to be multi-parties, whether it's private. We have several OEMs that invested in their own ramps, or government support, as well as the railroads. And then we also need to understand better the challenges of that intra-Mexico intermodal market. It's one that we feel has got a lot of potential, but like any new product, you really need to understand kind of what are the barriers and what is the service requirements. So that's just a quick overview from an XPO perspective. I appreciate your time. I look forward to the Q&A. Thank you. You want this?
I'm not sure about this logistics stuff. You move things all over the world quite simply. I can't move from the table to the podium without breaking and dropping everything. Can you imagine what I'm going to be like when I go past 40 years old? Fortunately, there's a long time to go before then. But thank you very much, Julie, for giving us an XPO and LSP perspective as well. So now it's time for your part. The conferences, all our conferences, every conference really we go to is not so much, it's not a lesson, it's not a lecture where you sit up here, take notes and then go home. You're actually, it's a good opportunity to participate, to ask questions, to make your own points, agreeing or disagreeing with the panel, anything that we've forgotten to mention, any ideas or solutions that you've got amongst yourselves there. This is your opportunity to be part of that. The usual rules apply. If you raise your hand, hopefully I can see you or one of my team will point you out. Wait for the microphone, say your name and your company name, and then make your comment or ask a question. So I'm going to start off on this one because I've got a question for Luis really, which is about, we focused a little bit or over the whole conference a lot really on the US. But I was wondering, what do you think will be the most important trade lanes? I suppose the US is always going to be, probably the most important. But what do you see is going to be the next most important trade lanes for GM internationally and connected with Mexico?
Okay, I will say the next one is the Asia trade lanes that we have. We have very important suppliers in China and in Korea. Those are the most important, I would say, in our models.
Yeah, okay. And Julie, what do you think and what are you kind of planning for? Are you still, as XPO, are you really focusing on US-Mexico?
Yeah, no, it is more US-Mexico. We do have a global XGL, a global logistics arm, but it's much more an MVOCC freight forwarder. But the piece I did forget to mention, that's a concern right now, Louis, is the West Coast port disruption. And we are working on a number of proposals for OEMs that want to divert to the Mexican ports and then go to the US. That's another important role that Mexico is playing.
Okay. Okay, over to you guys. Just for my team, I can't see very clearly because of the light, so if there is a hand up, make sure that you kind of make it obvious to us or to me. Okay. And then, you know, the other question is the capacity issue. There's a whole, you know, bunch of things that we're going to go on to beyond that. But, you know, looking at the capacity issues from North America, how is Mexico, the success of Mexico, how it's affecting North America capacity, and the solutions around that. So that's kind of what you talked about in your presentations, but I wanted to expand a little bit more on that. Perhaps, Julie, how do you feel it's affecting North American, or I should say US capacity?
Yeah, you know, there's a number of ways, and it's not just intermodal. I mean, certainly my background on the multi-level side, anytime you see a border crossing that backs up, or you have somebody who runs into a production hold of some sort, there are certainly ramifications on the U.S. side. But I think for the most part, there has been so much investment by the railroads. We could argue that it probably is behind where it could have been if there had been more modeling done and understanding of kind of how fast the economy is going to come back and then the Mexican growth. But I do think the investment that has happened and will happen in 2015 in particular will really help kind of streamline the flow. And I think that there's also a greater synergy between the U.S. and Mexican railroads. I think there's opportunity between the U.S. and Mexican intermodal associations. And I can't speak to the vehicle side of it, but I do think there's that opportunity. There's so many more things we can do from a government regulations, you know, trying to reduce the holds that have to happen at the border, trying to move in country, the auto decree. There's just so much more that can be done to really accelerate the product.
And to Luis, there's, you know, a few different issues: security, border control, customs, and you showed a slide that highlighted some of the things. But if you could fix one of those things, whether the government, whether GM said, you know what, we've finally found a magic wand, which one of those do you think is the biggest headache in your position?
Okay. Well, I think it's will solve a lot of our headaches is the expedite at the border crossing. We need to make sure that the border crossing is done fast and accurate. That's why we are looking for extending the hours. Certainly, we need to continue working with the governments and the customs agencies of both countries to make sure that we comply with all the requirements. But expediting those crossings will definitely help both sides of the flow, northbound and southbound.
And Julie?
Yeah, and I think the more partnership we can get, especially from the custom broker side of the house, I mean, there is additional time that to be picked up in transitioning when we're changing routings. I think that there's ways that we're doing business right now that could be changed if we just had a more open dialogue between kind of that entire supply chain that I talked about as well. But I would agree. I think the hours of border crossing, as well as some of those other government regulations, would really make a difference.
Yeah. And what about security? We haven't touched on that a lot, but that's got to be, you know, inbound and outbound. That's got to be a huge issue.
I would say for GM, we have, how can I say it? It's normal industry security issues that we have. No major complaint. I think we deal with some security issues, but I think are part of our life, and I think we can deal with those ones.
And Julie, what about thefts and things on your crossings? What's that? I mean, I saw the intermodal train earlier. So
right. Yeah, I mean, the focus has been, especially with the two Mexican railroads, to really isolate those routes that have been a concern. And the Inter-Pacifico is a great example because that's when we've worked very hard with the FXC, you know, to make sure we're using those big war locks on all the containers, and there's armed guards in the trains, and a lot of extraordinary measures because there is such upside in getting that freight off the road because it is a lot safer in intermodal.
Yeah, because we heard earlier someone explaining to us that the problem is with lean supply chains now, you can't afford to have, a container lost or something like that. It's not just the loss of the container, it's the effect that it has beyond that supply chain. Would you agree, Luis?
Yes, I will agree on that.
Yeah, what we've seen too is that OEMs, when they're committing to intermodal, to your point, they're putting a lot less fluff in their systems. And so anytime there's any sort of disruption, we've had some horrific weather events, just, anything, bridge washing out, it immediately is causing a production stoppage, where before we would have 2 or 3 or 4 days kind of pad in there, and it's just not there anymore.
Mm-hmm. And what about your premium freight side? Julie, so what gives you a headache on the general intermodal side gives you opportunities on the other side. What is that? If there's cross-border issues and and all this kind of stuff, that's going to have an even bigger effect in a way on premium freight because it's so time specific. You can't afford those, border crossing timing issues and so on. Is that a bigger? How's your premium freight business from Mexico to North America or the other way?
Yeah, actually we ran in 2014, on the exact numbers, I think like 200,000 expedite shipments to and from Mexico, and probably 5,000 air charters. So it's a situation where, if you've got a box over the road and gets in trouble, you can rescue it with a team, but then you can rescue it with an air charter. So I don't believe that we've had situations where expedite has completely fallen down, so it's caused a stoppage. We've got a situation actually today, because of the blizzard in the Northeast, we've got a box that's stuck up in Maine under 4 feet of snow that is causing a problem. So there are certainly those, but now, even then we're sending an expedite team to the supplier to get an alternate source. So I think it's a matter of having enough, tools in the belt.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, keep turning around, so I'd like to throw it out to you if there's any questions. There's a question at the back, thanks.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Jorge Fosla, Seglo Logistics. Tengo una pregunta para Luis. Mostraste proyección de un enorme crecimiento, ¿no?, de la producción de vehículos en México. De tu punto de vista, ¿cuál es el reto mayor para la logística de poder realizar un tal crecimiento que están proyectando?
Okay. I think the biggest challenge for logistics to support that is to be sure that we have the correct transportation mode to deliver those additional components to our facilities. And with that, what I mean is you have to have creativity on how you make the plan, since the sourcing of your suppliers for your new production. Okay, that is, you have to be smart and source the most costly parts close to your facilities. That will certainly improve the logistics and the cost. That is a very, very important thing. The other thing is we have to make sure that we design correct our new logistics plans in order to support those volumes. So part of my job is look for opportunities to improve our supply chains, our logistics, and we are making changes after we launch some programs because we didn't plan right the logistics since the beginning. So I think that is those points are key in order to be successful in the future growth that we see in Mexico.
Okay. I've got a question here that I've got through our live system, saying from the company Remy, that it's a good idea, Luis, about extending the customs service 24/7. Does GM already have GM already sent an official request to the Mexican government and USA Customs?
We are still working on that through our customs representatives, either in the Mexico side and in the US side. We haven't made still an official request, but we are planning to do that. Certainly, we need to, this kind of initiative needs to be an industry-wide. So we need the support of everybody in order to be successful with our governments and implement that one.
Yeah, very important point, and that's one of the, I hope, the benefits from industry forums, bringing people together, is that, you know, I'm sure, if you don't mind me saying, Luis, if other people here, other companies want to support you and also lobby together with you to achieve this, then I think you'd be happy to get that support from them as well.
That is correct.
Mm-hmm. Question in the middle somewhere.
Luis Miguel Perez from Moderator. One of the things that I just wanted to mention, because I was hearing about extending the hours of service, what Customs had said time and time again is that they gave us, I think it was 6 months, about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
But the problem was is that it was the right program, the right idea at the worst time.
That is correct.
Because that's when the peak of the violence in Mexico had been, 99 or something like that.
Yeah.
So what we've been addressing with the government is not necessarily to have it 724, because if you're exporting something of high value or high risk, are you going to ship it at 3 o'clock in the morning? You see what I'm saying? So until the security in Mexico issues is addressed, or you have some kind of route that is under surveillance or something like that, what we've seen is that the more efficient way of approaching this issue is to have the customs be a little bit more intelligent, if you will. If you go to Laredo, you can see perhaps that from certain hours, there's only 4 booths open, and they have 10. Mm-hmm. So, you know, and at other times, they have less. So I think what we've been addressing with the government is to address the resources timely. Mm-hmm. You know, if you know that your peak hours are from 10 to 2, then open 10 lanes. If your low times are from 8 to 10, then open 2. Mm. But I think that supporting what you're saying, I think it would be perhaps more viable, that option, than the 724, because of the other the security. And the other thing that we need to keep in mind is that the customs brokers work 2 shifts only. So we would have to have the brokers also work 724.
Mm. Okay. Luis, any points to...
No, I think the issue on border crossing, I think it's an industry-wide issue, and certainly we need to be creative on the ways that we can improve that. And working with the government is not easy sometimes, so we need to work together as an industry and maybe explode to other manufacturing or importers or exporters that are in there and make a joint effort. And certainly, I think all the ideas are valid, and I think we have a common goal, okay? It's improve the customs crossings or the border crossing. I think at the end, the goal should be that we have, I will say, we don't have to stop to cross the country to country. Okay? That will be the optimal goal or the ideal goal for a logistics guy.
So ideally you want 24/7 open crossing, but to get there, you're happy with any steps of improvement that can be made.
Yeah, certainly that will improve your performance and will help also dealing with having resources tackled to that portion that you are inefficient on waiting times.
Yeah, and again, the valid point there about being the industry working together. Kind of, you know, I'm on 2 minds about whether logistics is a competitive advantage. I'd like to think it is, but it's also not your marketing. That's not what's necessarily going to sell you cars. So things where the industry can work together, like trying to improve the customs, it's everyone benefits, but not one. Even as someone as big and powerful as GM, it's unlikely you can do it on your own. We need everybody. You need the other car makers, you need associations, you need tier suppliers, you need logistics companies all working together to that same end. Any more questions? At the front here. Take the one behind, in the second row first. That's it. Thank you.
Sí, buenas tardes. Rolando Chiorosini. Yeah, we talk
Chioro.
about, you talk about
Usted estaba hablando
automobile industry grow and also the needs of the logistic. But there are also another industry that are growing. Let's say oil and gas. And looks like the railroads are investing in tanks or equipment for the oil and gas. Do you foresee in the short term or medium term, means 2050, driver shortage because of that, or a lack of equipment for automobile industry?
Okay. I think what is important, and it was in the presentation, we have to make sure that our government understands that the growth that we expect from Mexico is not feasible if we don't have enough infrastructure to support that. So I think one of the big concerns that we have is we need to continue investing in our infrastructure. Certainly, knowing that we have competitions from other industries and the growth that we expect from the new government regulations or reforms that were implemented, we have taken some actions to work with our carriers, to develop our carrier, to focus in looking for developing longer relationships, and we as GM being more close to the carriers and making sure that we have the long-term relationship with them, assuring that we have the enough volume to cover our growth. Okay? If I see that there is a risk that will be a lack of carriers, could be, yes. I think it's one of the growth results, but I think it's always opportunity to be creative and get solutions like this in intra-Mexico intermodal that can solve some of the issues with carriers, and looking to be smarter on how you transport your materials to your facilities.
Right now,
So we need the microphone.
I mean, right now, the boom is with oil and gas.
Yeah.
So right now, are you experiencing shortage? Or do you expect a shortage in the next 4 or 5 months?
No, right now we don't expect any shortage on our carriers and rail providers.
I have a couple of questions. I'll start with G. Hello? Okay. Christopher Ludwig, Automotive Logistics. You work with LLPs in North America, specifically in Mexico as well, and I wondered if you can talk about, you mentioned optimizing the network and making improvements that way. I mean, are you trying to do that further in conjunction with your LLP, or are you building more kind of internal logistics engineering expertise within Mexico to handle that? So in other words, is it something that kind of comes from more in-house or from your partners?
Okay, thank you for the question. Yeah, we have a very good relationship with our LLP. We don't see that being like an outsider. They are actually part of our team. As a matter of fact, if you go to Ramos, where I'm based, the LLP team that is looking for ideas on improving our logistics network is right there in my office. So we are strongly related to that, okay? We see that we need, as GM, to be a major participant and I will say, I don't know if the word is right, we need to be like an, I will say it in Spanish, sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Una enzima that promotes those ideas to be implemented. We don't only rely on the LLP coming to us. We have to be the motor that impulses those ideas coming into our net.
Thank you. And a question for Julie as well. I guess it was 4 months ago at our conference in Detroit. I'm not sure if you were there. I think you were. One of the speakers talked about intermodal crossings between US and Mexico, that now there are 4 and historically there had been fewer. But he sort of suggested that maybe there was 1 or even 2 too many and that one would disappear over the next 18 months or so. I wondered, do you agree with that assessment? How do you see that developing? Or any views from XPO?
I missed part of Christopher. You say the intermodal providers, or?
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly from the conference, there was a speaker who pointed to the intermodal crossings between US and Mexico. That historically there had been maybe 1 or 2, today there are 4, but he suggested that maybe that there's 1 or 2 too many, and that one might disappear in the short to medium term. I just thought it might be interesting to have your perspective on that.
Yeah, so the question is the number of intermodal border crossings. Somebody at the Detroit conference said they thought there were too many at 3 or 4, and I would pretty much violently disagree. I mean, I think that with the increase in automotive production as well as the increase the gentleman mentioned in aerospace and the other industries, we need more crossings, not less. And then I also would add to Luis's earlier comments that we have seen more and more collaboration between the automotive companies, much more so than the last 10 years, all under the guise of AIAG and within the realm of all the rules, but more willingness to overlay their networks and really look for synergies, because I think everybody recognizes that the infrastructure in Mexico is doing fine right now with the current volume, but with the projected increases, there's got to be some different approaches taken where it's going to be very difficult to get product in and out.
Actually, sorry, maybe just a quick follow-up on that point to GM, because in the US, GM has actually shared cross-docks, for example, in some locations, and I wondered if that sort of cooperation has gone or been considered further in Mexico now, if you can share an example.
Actually, we are running a pilot test with one OEM here in Mexico, in San Luis Potosí. So that your comment is totally right. We are being creative. We are not only looking at a standalone network. We are looking with opportunities with not only the another OEMs. We are looking also with our suppliers opportunities to improve our logistics network. And I can tell you we are doing that with one OEM already since last year as a pilot test. We had comments with another OEM also here in Mexico. So there certainly we need to look for ways to improve our network.
Okay. Any other questions?
Stuart McGillivray from Toyota. This question's for Luis. When you're looking at your inbound supply chain, do you look at different Incoterms and try to figure out what is best for the entire business? Or do you always put the responsibility for the inbound on your suppliers, or do you manage that yourselves?
Well, thank you for the question. Certainly, we look, depends from where it's coming, and depending on that, we try to use the correct Incoterm for that. But mainly, we are responsible for the logistics. Even though we are not a logistics company, the volume that we manage together with our plants in North America and taking the approach on the overseas material or on the global scheme that GM has, we have some advantages to that. Certainly, if we have certain commodities that go to our plants, we look for delivery to point of use. That is certainly an option that we have for some specific commodities, and that, I think that is the right thing to do. But depends on which commodity we are talking and where it's coming from.
Any more questions? Okay. I think we'll call it a day then for this session. But obviously, you know, the multimodal. Well, firstly, the next session is a multimodal session with Ford, Ferromex, and Port of Veracruz. But also tomorrow we have at lunch we will have a presentation from the Director General for Multimodal Corridors and Logistics from the Ministry of Communications and Transportations. That's actually during the XPO sponsored lunch tomorrow. And then just after the lunch, there will be the think tanks or round tables. Well, again, XPO Logistics will be hosting a round table on multimodal inbound logistics, and there'll be a host of other round tables from short sea to fuel surcharges and so on. So make sure you're around for the think tanks tomorrow afternoon, just after lunch. Which leads to a final session where we gather some of the VIPs from car makers to join us for then. I just wanted to remind you, you're probably sitting on them, the evaluation forms. If you're leaving today or if you're leaving soon, please complete these evaluation forms. It's our very first Mexico conference, so any advice, suggestions you've got for us, please let us know. We'd really appreciate them. Obviously, if you're here for the 2 days, wait till tomorrow to give us the complete evaluation. On the other hand, if you thought the first day was so fantastic, then complete the evaluation form now while you're still in a good mood. But I'd like to thank the panel once again for a great session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luis.
Enjoy your coffee, visit the sponsor stands, and we'll be back at 4. Thank you.